me as Dawg Out West on Twitter and on Dawg Sports itself. I am with the honorable and venerable Macon Dawg today. Say hello.
Hello.
All right, so we have the final version of National Signing Day today. What are you thinking, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good class. 20 guys who fill needs that the Bulldogs had. Lower numbers probably than some people, myself included, thought that the Bulldogs would have at the beginning of the cycle. But we're in that position because of other good news. We forecast on Dawg Sports that UGA would have 22 to 23 slots in this class. But when we did that, we were forecasting that Jordan Davis would be gone, that James Cook would be gone, that we would probably have some additional attrition on the offensive line that we didn't have. Things like that are good problems to have. If you're Georgia, you fill the needs that you have with a class that, per player basis is right up there among the best that UGA has ever recruited in terms of that. 34 players this year were ranked 5-star recruits by 24/7 Sports, and Georgia got greater than 10%. Georgia got 4 of them. Had a couple of other guys like Nyland Green and Tyrion Dawkins, who frankly probably could have been 5-star recruits, just depending on a couple of analysts' evaluations of them. So just an outstanding class. If you're Georgia, it's not a big, exciting February signing day. It rarely is under Kirby Smart. Other than the occasional George Pickens signing, Kirby likes to go ahead and get it done. There's nothing wrong with that. They've already moved on to the class of 2022. Got a big pickup for that class today. I think if you're a Bulldog fan, you had reason to be happy yesterday about the position of your program. You have the same reasons today.
Yeah, I think college football, specifically recruiting, but college football in general has become so like headline focused, and fans, especially fans on Twitter and other social media, are often like, oh, Bama signed a bunch of 5-star guys today, or had some good signees to close the class. Georgia didn't, and that whole narrative of like Georgia can't catch Alabama. I'm seeing that today. Like even normally logical, rational Georgia fans that I interact with in some text threads and stuff like that. Like when Tyrion Arnold committed to Alabama today, it was like the 2021 national title was canceled, and that this whole Georgia's not going to be able to catch Alabama thing came up. I guess, do you kind of have a take on the Arnold miss? How big of a deal do you think it is?
Yeah, I don't think it's a huge deal, if I'm being perfectly honest. Again, the guy from this class who I think a lot of people it's hard to say that a national top 150 recruit is underrated, but if there's an underrated recruit in Georgia's class, it might be Nyland Green. Again, he's a guy, when you see him on film, he looks in a lot of ways to me like Richard LeCount did in high school, only he has the blue chip measurables that Richie didn't have coming out. So I think you got a guy who fills that kind of need, who can play safety, who can move over to the star and do all those things. Georgia really needed help in the secondary, but the thing is, Georgia needs help now in the secondary. Georgia doesn't need help 2 years from now in the secondary. They're going to probably pick that up through the transfer market. There are a couple of guys out there who we've heard rumblings may be interested in coming to Athens. I think Kirby Smart's going to see what's available in that regard. The truth of the matter is, when you lose your defensive backs coach 2 weeks before signing day, you shouldn't really be expecting to pick up a commitment from a top 10 defensive back. That's just not how the world works. There's no way that Charleston Warren leaving was going to put Georgia in a good position with Tyrion Arnold. Would Georgia have made room for him if he wanted to come to Athens? Oh, yeah, of course. They would have done that. But it's not a game breaker in this class by any stretch.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the interesting kind of thing about the numbers that you were referring to a few minutes ago about, this is a smaller class with 20 signees. You have to think, I like that you referred to it as the transfer market, and so the transfer portal. That's a much more honest describing word. But You got to think that probably between now and kickoff of next football season, Georgia will probably pick up somebody in the transfer portal, and there's always a ton of rumors out there of like who that might be. But do you feel like secondary is kind of the biggest concern for the 2021 Georgia football team?
Yeah, no, I think it's number one with a bullet. You look at the talent Georgia brings back on the defensive line. Clearly Jordan Davis is the headliner, but Devontae Wyatt, huge contributor. Jalen Carter really stepped into his role as a freshman. He's going to be back. You've got Trevon Walker on the outside, Nolan Smith. All of those guys, you loaded in the linebacker core. You bring back Adam Anderson, who's probably going to be one of the premier pass rushers in the SEC next year. You bring back, Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, guys who are legitimate NFL early draft pick prospects. It's defensively, it's the secondary. That's where Georgia is vulnerable, relatively speaking. And again, you've still got a lot of good players back there. The coaches loved what they saw from Christopher Smith filling in late in the year. I really liked a lot of the stuff that Latavian Brenny did. I thought he played very physical. We saw some of that in the bowl game, his coverage skills. I think from the safety slot are good. Lewis Sign obviously is a guy who fans and coaches love, who steps into that ranging safety kind of role. Georgia is not in bad shape as far as that goes, but they are going to need some young guys to step up. They are going to need probably some guys like Amir Speed, who have played limited backup roles to take some more snaps. The good news, again, is that those guys the reason they've not been starting is because they've been playing behind people like Eric Stokes and Tyson Campbell and Richard LeCount, who are legitimate, first day NFL prospects. And so, having played second string behind those guys and just sort of accumulating experience and developing as a player puts you in a position to succeed when you finally get that chance.
Yeah, 100%. There's a lot of experience there. And I mean, I think that this conversation might not feel as urgent to Georgia fans if Keely Ringo hadn't torn his shoulder up in preseason camp last year. Like if we had seen him on the field, just what he was in high school, it feels like there's a really good chance he's going to be a strong contributor from the word go next year. So it's, I think that there's a lot of good players there. There's a reason that Georgia's had a lot of really good recruiting classes, and there's been a lot of guys in the secondary. So I think I appreciate you being kind of the voice of reason on that matter. With 2021 wrapped up, I mean, is there any guys in this class that you feel like are, big sleepers?
In terms of sleepers, no. And it's not because Kirby Smart and his staff didn't go out and find those diamond in the rough kind of players. It's because at this point, they don't really need to. The guys who are in this class are all, highly rated blue chip prospects. I'm talking about guys like Nyland Green and Javon Bullard being, sort of the diamonds in the rough in this class. Let's be honest. These guys are 4-star prospects who had the chance to play at any number of other SEC programs. These are not guys. These are not the Thomas Davises who Brian Van Gorder goes and finds in a gym playing basketball and says, "Hey, I think that guy could probably play football too. Let me go work him out, behind the gym." And oh, look, you found Thomas Davis. Georgia is not at that point as a program. The guys who came in this class are all players who are being expected to come in and compete for a team that's going to compete for a national title. So, sleeper is a very relative term. Again, the guys who I think from the class I expect to contribute very early, probably more than people expect them to. I look at Nyland Green and I look at Tyrion Ingram Dawkins. Because I think there's room for somebody to move in the secondary, and I think Green is polished enough to step into that role right now, which a lot of players aren't. And again, Ingram Dawkins, we've talked about some on Dawg Sports, and we talked about this when he committed. At the time, I thought he was criminally underrated as a prospect. Since then, he's moved up.
Right.
He's got unbelievable range and physical tools. And is a guy who I think with good coaching which he's going to get from Trey Scott, is really going to remind people of Jalen Carter in some ways, as a guy who's just physically ready to play in the SEC right now. Has a good first step that you just can't teach. I mean, you can't make a guy who's 6'5", 310 move like that if he doesn't have the fast twitch muscle fiber to do it. That's not coaching. There are just a very few individuals every year who can do that. And from what I've seen, he's one of them. And I think that's going to be important for Georgia, as we look to move on in 2022 from Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, Julian Rochester, those guys who've been stalwarts on the inside.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I think we were having a little breakup there, but I think we're good. Yeah, so I mean, I think looking at my guy that I think I'm most excited about is probably Xavier Sori. Just watching his tape, he does a lot of things well, but he seems like a very instinctive linebacker. And with, I think Quay Walker is a great, inside linebacker. I think, having Nakobe Dean there is great. Like the middle of that linebacking core is pretty solidified, but I think it'll be interesting to see kind of who shakes out at the outside linebacker positions, because we like to play a lot of guys there. And, Adam Anderson, like you referenced, is a great pass rusher, but sometimes leaves a little to be desired against the run. So I think the balance of those two might be a fun thing to watch. As we move towards 2022, Georgia's already off to a hot start. I feel like with the commitment of Gunnar Stockton, that probably locks up like another half dozen high 4-star to 5-star prospects that are just going to want to play with him. But what do you feel like is a priority for the 2022 class?
Well, they needed to get a couple of guys on the defensive front. They've already got that, obviously, with Bear Alexander and Tyre West. I think they'll probably add somebody in that regard as well. Need at least one tailback, probably two in the class. And so that's going to be an area where I think the commitment of Gunnar Stockton helps a lot with that. Going ahead and locking that down. Also going to need some wide receivers. Some people were, I think, concerned about the 2021 wide receiver class. It's not as star-studded, perhaps, as that 2020 class with Jermaine Burton, for example. But the good news is that Georgia is really loaded in the class of 2022 at wide receiver. There are at least 5 guys in the Peach State who have the potential to be national top 140 or 150 type players at the wide receiver position. So Georgia's going to be fine there. I'm not worried about that at all. They do need to add to those numbers. I think a big question is going to be how things shake out this season. If Georgia can take a step forward and play for a national championship or even win one, I think they're in great position to be able to sell prospects on the fact that Kirby Smart, in addition to recruiting well, can get them to the places that Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney have been getting the players they recruit.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's the rings, and it's going to be interesting to see how this defensive back class that, we've got a lot of guys that are about to be NFL draft eligible. It'll be fascinating to see how those guys kind of shake out in terms of, where are they going to fall? Because between Stokes, Campbell, and Daniel, you may have 3 defensive backs that go in the first 3 rounds of the draft. And that will be a great selling point on the trail. It's almost like a guy like Tyrion Arnold. You almost wonder if it was a year later, would he have ended up in Athens? We'll never know, obviously, but I think, a lot to look forward to in the 2022 class. Georgia's started as hot as anyone. It will be, the thing about having a team that returns all of the receiving production that Georgia does and could find itself playing for a national title next year is you probably end up with a lot of early exits to the NFL. So it'll be interesting to see sort of how the staff tries to manage that. I feel like Kirby and the staff has always done a really good job of kind of anticipating what guys might go early and filling those holes a year early in recruiting. So do you have any final thoughts before we roll?
No. I think if you're a Georgia fan, you have to be just incredibly pleased with the fact that if you look out over the past 4 years, there's not a position on offense, defense, or special teams where you can say that Kirby Smart and his staff have under recruited. They've built the roster that they said in 2016 they needed to build to be able to compete with Alabama. If you look at the roster as a whole, taking those 2017 through 2021 classes together, Georgia is at this point on paper as talented as Alabama. They're as talented as Clemson, maybe more so. Certainly as talented as Ohio State and Oklahoma. It's a continuation of the theme we've seen, which is stacking the talent on the roster such that you put yourself in a position annually to compete for national titles.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to feel like they're in that position now. The one kind of qualifying sort of ticket to entry with the playoff and the national title seems to be elite quarterback play, and with Daniels on campus, Vandegrift coming in, and Stockton behind him, you have to feel like that position's pretty much secured for the next 4 seasons. So I don't see why you wouldn't be optimistic if you're a Georgia fan. I feel like signing day is always either everyone's really excited and national title party being planned, or the season might as well be canceled, but the answer is usually somewhere in the middle. So, Jeremy, thank you for your time this afternoon/evening, and we will come back here on Dawg Sports Live next time there's something to talk about. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is Dawg Sports